Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Derik Bruin, the Senior Life Sciences and Diagnostics Tools Analyst for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. We also cover CROs, CDMOs, animal health, some dental companies. We're the island of misfit healthcare toys, as we like to refer to our sector. It is my extreme pleasure to up here to have a conversation with Marc Casper, CEO, Chairman of ThermoFisher Scientific. For way of background, I've known Marc for, I think we've been doing this about the same amount of time. I started covering Thermo Electron as a stock in 2003, about the same time you joined, and so we've have watched the industry evolve and watched the industry grow. And I think that's probably a good place to start, Marc. It's, I don't know if some people in the audience have a good understanding of just what ThermoFisher is today. Sure. I mean, when I started in the laboratory, I'd never heard of Thermo until I came to Wall Street, and now, you know, Thermo is the, you know, it is the lab, Amazon of the lab. It is the company that's out there.
So Derik, thanks for doing this together today, and Chris, thank you for the invitation, and really great to see in the auditorium today and out at the conference so many customers and researchers that we work with, and I'd remiss without starting with a thank you for the amazing work that each of you are doing and making a difference to patients and ultimately to society. So ThermoFisher Scientific, we're the largest of the life science tools, diagnostics, and pharma services companies in the world. We're headquartered here in Waltham, Massachusetts, and to frame a little bit about what we do without being a commercial, you know, we're about a $40 billion revenue company, over 100,000 really amazing colleagues, and provide the life science tools that researchers use all the way through producing commercial medicines ultimately at the end of a process. And then I bring one other lens, which is I've been on the Mass General Brigham Board and the Brigham Women's Board for a number of years, and really a privilege to be associated with the organization as well.
So, Marc, I guess the first question would be, it's just like, can you talk about why Thermo sort of moved into the cell and gene therapy area? Because it was a gradual evolution of the space.
Sure.
And just from going from supplying tools to now doing this. So talk about your transition in the space and why you're excited about the whole area.
Yeah, so the strategy of the company is to enable our customer success and enable our customers' important work. And one of the things, because we do so much work with early research, that in supporting it, we can see trends, and that informs the strategy over time. And as more and more research over the years has happened in, you know, cell therapies and gene therapies, I'm talking now, you know, 10 years, 15 years, kind of the early work, that informed the investment strategy to support that effort and enable that effort. And over time, we went from really being a provider of things like cell culture media, the Gibco products, through ultimately being, you know, one of the largest, if not the largest, viral vector manufacturers in the world. And we have cell therapy capabilities and really have gone through that evolution over time to support the exciting field that goes on in cell and gene therapy.
And I guess, you know, from that standpoint, can you talk about what you've, I guess once again, can you talk a little bit about the capabilities of the company? It's like, how involved are you in helping researchers scale up? How involved are you helping companies do it? It's like, what's the, you know, do people come to you and ask for advice? Do people, you know, they come to you with fully formed ideas? Or just sort of like walk us through the process.
Yeah, so the process, it varies, right? So it can be supplying, you know, the enabling technologies, the research tools that you would find in an academic lab, you would find in a biotech or pharmaceutical company, you would see in the cell and gene therapy fields, right? And that's really where things get started. But ultimately, the science is hard here, right? And therefore, actually expertise really matters, right? And what we're trying to do is create, you know, repeatable knowledge and scalable knowledge so that ultimately you can bring the cost down of these medicines so patients benefit, right? So we've invested very substantially in standardization, in the tools, and how do you, if you're on the cell therapy side, how do you manufacture the cell therapies in a cost-effective way? What are the lessons that have been learned? And then ultimately, adding the capabilities to do that in-house, not as the innovator, but as an enabling service provider, so that the researchers can really bring the novel ideas and we can take the lessons learned of standardization to ultimately help bring the cost down and bring it to market more quickly. Like even in Massachusetts, we have 3 scale viral vector facilities, right? And we're just bringing on board our 3rd one, which is in Plainville, Massachusetts. It's a huge facility, right? It's 200,000 square feet, and it gives you a sense of just how much demand and how much excitement is in the field. And it's our job to really be able to help our customers, support that evolution.
So that's sort of, sitting as a sell-side analyst and talking with investors, I think there still are a number of investors who are somewhat skeptical. And skeptical from the sense that I think when they think about bioprocessing and bioproduction, they think about more like the monoclonal antibody space. And it's easy to see, it's like you're going to create X number of kilograms, you've got this much, you need chromatography media, you need these many filters, and you can sort of do a cost of goods analysis of it. I think it's a little bit harder to get that sort of like clarity into the cell and gene therapy market. So can we talk a little bit about sort of like the growth rates of sort of like what you're seeing and sort of like also the profitabilities in some of these areas and what can and essentially and how does this sort of like translate to potentially what can happen with the customer's cost of goods?
Sure. So I think from the way we would think about the analogy first to monoclonals, and then we'll talk about some of the realities of where cell and gene therapy is today. But if you think about over time, over the decades, the cost and the certainty in the manufacturing scale up really progressed over time. There was an experience curve, largely driven by the innovators, and ultimately you're able to get very cost-effective biologics coming out through those processes, right? And when we think about cell and gene therapy, they're earlier in that life cycle of going down the cost curve, and part of what we're trying to do in both is actually to accelerate that so that more patients will benefit ultimately from the scientific breakthroughs, right? So that's the concept. When I think about gene therapy side of the equation, that's probably, even though the cost can be very high, it's probably further down the cost curve in the respect that there are scale companies that are actually really focused on standardization and trying to make the process more efficiency. And on the cell therapy side, it depends ultimately on whether allogeneic is successful or not, because there you could see the same dynamic happen where autologous is really going to be, how the academic medical centers are able to drive down the costs, more locally. And so that'll be a different sort of localized manufacturing challenge that we're trying to help support. Growth is very high, right? I mean, you can tell from the number of attendees that are interested here in the conference and the amazing panels that have been going on, which is, a segment that's growing from our perspective, right, as a tool and service provider. This is a strong double digit, 20, 25% type growth business in terms of where things are. And, it is a business that hasn't yet reached the maturity that you would say and some of the other biologics are, but it's a business that we're able to make money on, so we're able to reinvest and support the enabling technology. So it's a profitable business and one that is growing very rapidly. So hopefully that puts in at least some context.
Yeah. And what about, just from my observation, a lot of this still seems to be very bespoke, right? So, and you've talked about standardization. What about the use of automation and some of the ability to sort of like that? I mean, that, Thermo has been very, very good at some of these other industries. We were talking earlier about, my visit to Life Technologies in the early days when you went from a bunch of people putting tubes into little boxes and then Thermo bought it, and now it's automated and it's like, can the same thing sort of happen here to help once again drive the cost of production down for the customers? Yeah.
So on the cell therapy side, we and others have launched platforms to be able to, at your academic medical centers, effectively drive the cost down of the cell processing and that. So that is an evolution that's happening, and it's not at the end state yet. But if I think about some of the things that we have our R&D dollars invested in, it's really to bring the cost down of those cell therapies. On the gene therapy side, we are investing a huge amount of money in bringing the cost down. So we're taking all of the benefits of understanding how the different technologies support the development of gene therapies and then finding ways to make them more efficient and more effective. And I'm very excited about what the potential is there. So yeah, so it's still the steep part of the cost curve, but lots of opportunity to make a difference.
So switching topics a little bit, historically Thermo's been seen as sort of like a tool provider, and then with the Patheon and Brommer acquisitions, more of a CDMO. Then last year you did something unusual in that you acquired PPD. You became a clinical trial service provider and a contract research organization. I guess, can you provide a bit of more color on the role that PPD plays in the cell and gene therapy market and sort of the clinical trials that the organization's touching in this area?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've thought about for years is, what are the bigger challenges that our industry is going through, what our clients are facing, and where is the money spent, right? Where is their efficiency opportunities? And obviously the clinical trial process is an incredibly capital-intensive process, right? And so we spent years thinking about, what's our right to participate, where would it add value to the industry, and ultimately made the decision a little over a year ago to enter that segment through an acquisition. And our goal is really two things: be really good at providing clinical trials services, and PPD had a good track record, so maintaining that, but looking for opportunities to actually take time out of the process from the development, manufacturing, and clinical trial process to actually bring the information closer together. So having a development organization, a manufacturing organization, and a clinical trial organization, in particular in the cell therapy and gene therapy area, we're very excited about the opportunity to focus on taking time out. And PPD, or no, clinical research side, has a huge number of studies that they're doing, clinical trials in this area, and therefore we think it's an interesting opportunity. No magic here, right? It doesn't happen in the short term, it happens over time.
Right.
It happens with collaborations with our customers, and if we do that well, then we can drive the cost down of bringing a medicine from an idea ultimately to an approved product.
I think there was some in the industry that were a little bit skeptical when Thermo moved into the CMO space with Patheon, and similar skepticism when you bought PPD. But how are your customers responding? Is it a real appreciation for the fact there's an end-to-end workflow that you can do with the company if you choose to do that?
I think ultimately for a company like ours and our role, which is enabling the success of researchers and ultimately enabling the success of the biotech and pharmaceutical industry, we have to do a good job every day in supporting our customers and achieving an impact. And if we continue to do that, then our clients give us more opportunities to work with them, right? And it's really quite simple, which is we built enough credibility that folks are willing to try things, right? Which is, all right, if Thermo Fisher's thought about it and invested $20 billion to get into a market segment, then it's a significant move, and therefore you get the benefit of the doubt in the beginning, but then you got to do a great job. And if you do a great job and then you show that you've added more value than what others can do, then you do well and your business thrives. And if you don't, then you got to recalibrate and adjust.
Yeah, one of the big, I think one of the big debates, I think one of the things we're trying to understand on the investment side is there's this debate on, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of companies added biomanufacturing capacity, for obvious reasons. Now there's a concern that there may be too much capacity out there. So it's like, what's your sort of thought on, being able to transition all the capacity there? And obviously the thing being that the cell and gene therapy capacity is not the same as monoclonal antibody or vaccine capacity. But so we can talk about that in general, just in terms of the overall this and like how much of the, is there too much cell and gene therapy manufacturing capacity right now? Is there not enough? Where are we in the process? But in the broader context of the whole bioprocessing.
Yeah, so I think the really interesting thing, one of the lessons that I took away from the pandemic was that a company like ours would support every bespoke process with all of the different ways a process was designed and provide all of the enabling technologies and so forth. And the clients, the innovators, really didn't have to think a lot about the selection of who they work with, which products, and so forth, because supply chain resilience, supply chain assuredness, getting what you need when you need it was never really a question, right? Things have sort of worked, right? And then all of a sudden the pandemic happens and you have this incredible surge in demand that has worked its way through the whole ecosystem, right? So the first thing I think about is, the more you can drive towards standardization, the more that you can find commonality with other technologies, the better off you're going to be as an innovator, because you're not then captive to there's only one product I can have to make my cell therapy or gene therapy, whatever it is. And so that's the first thing I would think about. When I think about where the industry is today, on the gene therapy side, capacities come up. So there's, I think we're in a dynamic now while there's a huge number of trials. I think, there's many, many trials and there's a lot of activity. I would say manufacturing is largely available. I mean, I'd say it's tight, but it's not, it's not impossible to get the slots to make the products. On cell therapy, it's more constrained still. It would be my take on it, and there's still more capacity constraints. In terms of all of the raw material supply, I still think it's another year before the industry gets back to the balance between demand outstripping supply. I think there's still a huge backlog of activity that needs to be cleared on the single-use technologies, all of the different medias, those things that really were pent-up demand over the last couple of years. It's still working its way through the system.
Great. Is there any questions from the audience? I can't see a thing, so if there are,
you may not have gotten the iPad, so it's possible that.
Oh, that's right. I did not get the iPad. So
That's okay.
Anyhow, well, that's actually. I mean, the pandemic was certainly, was certainly an interesting sort of situation. I mean, not only did Thermo respond with bioprocessing and vaccines, but you also made an enormous effort into the diagnostic space. There we are. Thank you. Good. Thank you. Good. I'll stop that question because I actually had some here.
Good.
So good. I was going to do some random diagnostic question, but these are much better. Okay. With the variety of virus types and cargoes and the influence that the cargo seems to have on yields and quality, are there any learnings on developability, manufacturability that you can share on this?
Yeah, so, one of the things that, probably one of the lessons that, our scientific teams constantly come back to me with is the earlier the dialogue is with the research community to share the lessons learned before every technology is locked in, and then therefore you're constrained to manufacture exactly the specific process, the better off you are ultimately in sharing the experience curve. And so it's really the very early engagement has been, I think, the takeaway, because many of the different approaches can work, right? But you want to really figure out, not to rehash old ground, right? And try to get where you can get standardization, get it, and where you need, customization to have it in the most relevant parts.
Got it. What about human power and labor cost? I mean, are there enough researchers and enough people to sort of do this? I mean, we've heard this from some various bioprocessing consultants that there's a real capacity crunch that might limit the industry. Are you able to hire? Are you able to manage like that? Are you hiring?
Yeah,
maybe some people looking for jobs in the audience.
So, it is such an exciting field. And, we've expanded our team hugely over time. And, it's a competitive, market for talent. But, if I think about, the greater, Boston area, the Cambridge ecosystem, if I think about the Bay Area, if I think about San Diego, those three ecosystems in the U.S., there's such amazing talent there that the talent usually flows to where the good ideas are. So it really has not been, a significant constraint at this point. I think cost has clearly gone up, right, in terms of that dynamic that's out there. But that's the world we live in these days.
So what mechanisms and processes do you have in place to know what your customers want? how do you think about pivoting to meet new and increasing demands?
Yeah, so you know, my mom used to tell me, and it was a good reminder because I was probably doing something wrong, that we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And that philosophy is very well ingrained in the company, right? Which is we listen to what our customers are experiencing, saying, thinking, and then we try to be helpful, right? And so that's the approach that I would say has served the company well, and you know, we continue to be really focused on enabling success and learning and sharing our knowledge where we have it, and being the first to admit when we don't, to say, hey, we don't know the answer to that question, but we'll help you, you know, do that. So that's the philosophy. You know, the way that we've done it in the practical reality is we have, you know, large scientific teams that work with our clients all the time. Their job is actually to help our clients improve their processes and, you know, just solve their challenges, right? And you know, they're not selling anything. They're really trying to help customers be successful. And if they have capabilities that would be supportive, they'll let the clients know. And if they don't, they'll also let them know that as well. But that's how we approach it.
So somebody in the audience wants to know, what's the hot new latest technology from Thermo in cell and gene therapy or bioprocessing?
Yeah, you know, so there's so many exciting things going on in the industry, not just at ThermoFisher Scientific. It's really awesome in terms of the innovation because of the great work that is happening in the field. You know, one of the things that I'm excited about is we continue to improve our cell therapy workflow that can be applied in the major medical centers, and continue to add modules to that to drive costs down and improve standardization. And that's something that's pretty interesting in terms of making a difference and solving some very practical challenges that exist today.
So how do you see the roles of CMOs in drug and process development evolving over the next 5 years? So where does the industry go from here?
Yeah, so for cell and gene therapy, I do believe that the role of the service providers will continue to be very significant. I think that just the nature of so many great ideas, so many great labs working on it, so many small innovative companies progressing, that leveraging the broader ecosystem that exists in the contract development and manufacturing side is going to be a major trend. I think it's actually different than how monoclonals played out, whereas the large innovators did, and then ultimately the CDMO industry existed here. I think it's the opposite. I actually think the service providers will lead the standardization, and some companies will have and will continue to build their own capabilities. So I think that's ultimately the trend that you'll see. And on the clinical research side, pretty similar in terms of, you know, leveraging the industry service providers will be the major way of supporting these important breakthroughs.
Got it. I think in the final minutes as we sort of wrap this up, are there any specific partnerships that you want to highlight, or anything that you can sort of point to that you know, collaborations the company's doing to sort of underscore your investment in cell and gene therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one of the, you know, we're really excited about the many collaborations that we have with our clients, and to help them advance the science and bring medicines to patients faster. And we don't usually get into too many of the specifics externally, but we have a number of them ongoing, and you know, we love to be in the background to help so many of the medicines that have been approved play some role in that process.
Great. And with that, thank you, Marc. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Derik, thank you.